Welcome back to Recorded Conversations, the podcast that's dedicated to compassionately considering all perspectives while engaging in authentic, connected dialogue. I'm Danielle Kingstrom. Matthew Niemi joins the conversation today. Matthew is a Ph.D. candidate for Islamic Studies at the University of Indiana, and he reached out to me after hearing the episode Psychedelic Christianity, in which I question whether Islam offers similar doctrines of forgiveness as Christianity. As a listener, he felt compelled to confront the confusion and offered space to be a guest and discuss and help inform. Listeners, I encourage you to do this. If you hear something in my podcast that you disagree with, that you're confused by, that you want me to peel back a little bit more, and you'd like to join the discussion, please reach out to me. This is what the podcast was created for. This is what Recorded Conversations is about. And I am happy to announce that I had another person just recently write to me, tell me about all the things that he has been discovering for himself in the way that he is relating to himself, to lovers, and to the world, and wanted to join on the podcast. And so on Friday, I'll be sitting down with a new guest and letting him share space with me and share his story. So I just want to, as a caveat, always, every episode, if there's something that convicts you, that compels you, that conflicts you, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. So today, Matthew shares what he's learned of Islam, flexes his Arabic skills, and then we dig into forgiveness, politics, and we talk a little bit about censorship. He drops a few verses from Matthew 23. He shows how Jesus is regarded in Islam, and he parallels the similarities that we can see between Christianity and Islam. Allah is a God of mercy, love, and forgiveness, expecting the same of his followers. And is it a good thing for Islam or any religion to be entangled in politics? This is a discussion that we embark on. Matthew articulates that, like Christianity, there's a spectrum of entanglement similar to what we have here in our society in the United States. We dig into social problems and our responsibility as a collective and as an individual. I share a little bit about my concern for the eroticizing of politics. I explain how I believe feminism lost its power by seeking all of the power, and why I want to keep eroticism separate from politics. Matthew raises good points that politics and religion are helpful for us to organize and operate within the society we live in. We cover a variety of topics, so I encourage you to settle in and get cozy. And as always, listeners, I ask you to compassionately consider the perspective of Matthew Abdullahak Niemi. Enjoy the episode.
Certain phrases we use in conversation that are like alhamdulillah, praises to God.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if I accidentally say something, I'll try to translate it,
Awesome.
for anybody listening.
Awesome. So first, okay, so Matthew Abdullahak, is that how you say it?
Yeah, Abdul Haq, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what's your last name?
Niemi is a Finnish
N-
last name.
Nice. Okay. Well,
Mhm.
nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Um,
Yeah,
and
okay. Should I call you Danielle or?
yep, Danielle
Okay.
works just fine. I just want to say I really appreciate you reaching out to me and even
I,
offering
I,
the criticism you did, because I really appreciate that.
yeah, and I
Um,
appreciate you responding as well. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm really, really looking forward to this. Just, yeah, I
Cool.
want to be a sponge to absorb. I have
Likewise.
tried to learn about Islam,
Hmm.
and I just feel like I'm not hitting on the right people who know how to
Hmm.
present it to, my fresh eyes. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's what I'm hoping for here, for you to just kind of present a really good
Hmm.
understanding, kind of an intro for everybody listening who really doesn't know anything about Islam. So
Hmm.
with that, if you wouldn't mind, could you just give us a little bit of a background, who you are, what you do, and what inspired you to reach out to me to present all
Uh,
of this?
so my name is Matthew Niemi, and yeah, I sort of when I converted to Islam, I added Abdul Haq as kind of like an extra, Islamic nickname, I guess. Um, and I'm a PhD candidate in Islamic Studies and Religious Studies at Indiana University, and right now, and I'm working on finishing my dissertation from home in the Chicago area, and I'm working for a place called Al Furqan Foundation, which I'm not representing them or anything, but yeah, I work for a foundation that is it's sort of like a religious publisher outreach uh, foundation, and yeah, so I do sermons and fundraising for them. But yeah, what was the other question? Was there another question
Um,
on the list?
yeah, just what inspired you to reach out and
Oh,
want to kind of share
yeah,
your
right.
story?
Yeah. So, is audio quality okay? By the way, I wasn't
Yep,
sure. Okay, cool.
can hear you
So
great.
the
Yeah.
yeah. So basically, I was very interested in your podcast. I started listening to an episode on psychedelic Christianity, and yeah, I just got the sense that I think you and I will definitely be very different in certain ways, which will, God willing, benefit us. That we'll learn from each other. And I also thought I vibed with you on certain, like in certain aspects of spirituality, perhaps. Because
Cool.
I think I noticed, you like me, I think have a strong, intellectual component to our spirituality, and yeah, I was really enjoying the episode and everything, and
Awesome.
of this. And then you guys had said, and granted, you were admitting that you didn't really know much about Islam or what have you, but you had said something about, how Islam doesn't have forgiveness in it, or something to that effect. And I was, and
Yeah.
you had heard it from somebody,
Yeah.
and I was kind of like, oh, like, I was just like, oh man, I just had a, naturally had an urge to, like, I love religion, and so I
Yeah.
love sharing with people, and I just had an urge to talk with you and be of benefit to anybody listening.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, please. So let's start. So, yeah, in a couple of the topics you touched on was talking about kind of forgiveness, politics, and just kind of maybe a generalized understanding of Islam. So where would
Hmm.
we want to step into this first? I've never heard of, say I'm a person that's never heard of Islam,
Hmm.
but maybe I've only heard bad things. What are some of
Hmm.
the first three or four foundational truths of Islam that you can share with
Hmm.
us that
Hmm.
people might misperceive or misunderstand?
Yeah. So I guess I would say, just overall, Islam is actually, like, Islam and Judaism are probably the two most similar religions in the world, as far as, things that consider themselves to be different religions. Of course, you have different, sects within Christianity or what have you, but and within Islam. But as far as, things that we typically call, like, this is a religion, this is a different religion. Islam and Judaism, I would say, are kind of the most similar to each other, though Islam also shares important things with Christianity as well.
Hmm.
And we like to think of ourselves as a happy medium between Judaism and Christianity in some ways. That's our branding anyway. But
It's good.
the yeah, so one fun way I like putting it is that Islam is like Judaism light plus Jesus for the world, something
Nice.
like that. So it's very very similar to Judaism in the sense that we have scripture and we recite it. We have daily prayers. We have, dietary laws, things, daily rituals, a very kind of like, there's a sort of institutionalized effort to infuse every aspect of your life with remembrance of God. And then I suppose in the way that it would share with Christianity, for instance, or at least modern day Christianity, is that it is proselytizing. Like, it's not considered ethnic, for instance, clearly, from my although, granted, I mean, there's people, there's born Muslims in Bosnia and whatnot that would look just like, or even in Pakistan, there's people in Pakistan that, especially if you get in the northern parts where you have people who are more, Afghan, whatever you want to call these ethnic groups. But anyway, I'm getting distracted here. But and forgive me for going just slow me down if you need to. I've had some coffee earlier, so I'm kind of
we're good
and
right
a little
now.
bit of the nerves, and I'm just kind of tugging along.
Your pace will slow down once you get comfy.
Okay, so so like Christianity, it's a it's a non-ethnic religion. And it's more, I guess, a little bit more geared toward sharing, seeing it rather than in Judaism, where you see, there are certain laws, I suppose, that are for Jews only, and then the rest of humanity just has the Noahide laws. Are you familiar with the Noahide laws?
No, I am not.
Oh,
not by term.
Oh, okay. So I guess it's probably in Genesis. Or I'm not sure if it's in Genesis or if there's something that's kind of like gathered by the rabbis. But there's a concept in Judaism of the Noahide laws, which are, while the Jews have, the children of Israel have the Torah, there are certain more generic laws that were given to Noah and apply to all mankind. And they generally include things like not having idolatry, not having adultery, murder, eating blood, eating and like the necessity to establish courts of law, not no murdering, I think I said.
So kind of like a universal moral foundation expected of all of humanity.
Yes. Okay. And so Islam kind of thinks of itself in many ways as like those Noahide laws, and it is very similar, actually. So Muslims kind of like fall perfectly into the category of Noahide laws from the perspective of the Jewish tradition, since it's very against idolatry and it has these other kind of common qualities. And then another way in which Islam is like Christianity is that you have Jesus is accepted as a prophet and the Messiah in the Islamic tradition, and he is by at least by the Orthodox mainstream, whatever you want to call it, Sunni Islam. Jesus has a role in the end times in which he returns to rule as the rightful king of the world, I suppose. And although he is I guess clearly said to not be God or the Son of God, but he is called a prophet and a servant of God, and the breath or spirit of God, and a word of God.
So Jesus is revered within Islam in that he's acknowledged as an important prophet and player in the end of the game, basically. Okay, cool, good, got that.
And then obviously, the other addition obviously would be Muhammad, peace be upon him, who we see as kind of like a revivification of the real prophetic tradition, which is very close to, from our perspective, the way Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, would have taught and worshipped in, and etc. And that the things that set Christians astray, we often see as coming from Paul in some ways.
I've had my issues with Mr. Apostle Paul before.
Oh yeah, he's a character. He's a character.
Sometimes I love him, and other times I hate him and want to be like, nope, throw it all out. It's icky.
I have a hard time with him. I feel like he's just, I don't know, he's just all over the place. And
he was a guy who was learning his own journey, and so
Yeah.
We'll have grace on that.
He was doing it for the first time. He was building a church for the
Exactly.
first time. So I'll give,
Yeah.
you know.
He was growing into his position, and so we do see an evolution along the way in the Bible. So
hmm
yeah.
Yeah, and I get the sense that he was I think he did receive some genuine like spiritual insights about like why would one follow the law, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
I think he gets a little he gets himself a little worked up, and he gets a little hyperbolic, and people then I think kind of misunderstand what he's saying, or at least what he set out to
Yeah.
say, because he often gets a little worked up against his fellow Jews who
Yes.
believe in Torah practices for the Gentile believers.
Yeah. Well, and I
So,
suppose too, I mean, what kind of a betrayal is he having to himself too, having come out of that and then having the Roman influence and then going, wait, everything I learned was a lie. I have to start again. And yeah, it's such a philosophical conundrum. I think that we all go through, right, in life, and we start going, wait, what do I do
mm-hmm.
here? And this is what I'm going
Right.
to do. And sometimes we get overzealous like the apostle did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump back a little bit. What intrigued you about Islam? Did you grow up in it? Have you always been a
No,
practice? Okay. So do you have any Christian history? Did you grow up in an atheist house? What was your upbringing like?
I was brought up in a very liberal Protestant church, the UCC, United
Okay.
Church of Christ. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. What's your background, by the way?
Christian light,
Okay.
hippie
Okay.
influence.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's mine.
I think.
With a little bit of everything, Buddhism and
Uh-huh.
Black Panther and
hmm
Michael Jackson. So that's
hmm
kind of where all my spiritually shaken up in.
I got the sense that you and I share this to some. We're kind of like hippies who also kind of get skeptical of hippies, and we're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
well, I don't know, the church, or what, organized religion has a
Mhm.
lot of like benefits and spiritual
It
technologies
does.
and
It
traditions
does.
and wisdom and things. So like, hold on, let's not go jump into la la
And
land
it's
quite,
funny that you bring that up too, because that's an interesting component just of what I've observed in myself in my kind
hmm
of evolution is at one point I was like, history, religion, I'm over it,
hmm
right? Like it's not important. And the more I peel back all the layers to, relearn a new process, the more I come to have a greater reverence for tradition, for
hmm
ritual, for, sacred rites of religion. And then we can't really say we're not influenced by it because we've never been removed from its
hmm
influences. And so it's like, if I go back to a deeper philosophy in my life and that, I should seek to understand everything rather than resist it or reject it, then you kind of come to an appreciation for the beauty that folds itself in all of the religion all over
hmm
the world. And you
hmm
don't have to butt against it, but you can still, observe the flaws and go, okay, well, I'm just not going to do that and
hmm
keep promoting it forward. So yeah,
hmm
exactly. I have a reverence for it, but as for me personally, I don't adhere to anything.
hmm
I like to just absorb things and go
hmm
absorb more things and just for now I'm just
You're a seeker that
learning process.
primarily dwells within the Christian tradition.
But yes, it
Okay.
does. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think sometimes like maybe you'll relate to this is like there might be some position that at some point in your life you think like, oh, this is like hippy dippy bullshit or whatever, and then
Hmm.
like later on you kind of like or at least this is my experience anyway. I don't know, maybe if you can relate to this. Like sometimes there's sort of a hippy dippy thing, and I'm kind of like, oh, whatever, it sounds dumb, or and then I kind of uh, like I dive back into the studying of the tradition and using and sort of reasoning through things, and then I feel like maybe a few years later I'll find myself like having that same position, but it's like I got to it in such a different way that I'm
Yeah.
like it's like and then I at least this is my arrogant thing of like, yeah, that's true, but I don't, but do you guys realize why? I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you worked
Yeah.
through? Have you taken the journey to get to this point, or are you
That's
just?
really important though, because someone
Mhm,
can tell us something and be like, no, really, it's true. And we can be like, eh. And later on, you go, oh, well, they were right about that. But I
mhm,
had to have it shown to me in a different way, or it had to
mhm,
relate to something more
mhm,
personal or intimate.
Yeah.
within my life. So intimacy, let's go there. So this is one of the things that I'm often conflicted about in understanding of Islam is
Mm-hmm.
I kind of dig around in the field of eros, and with that goes eroticism and understanding, you know, the sacred history of seduction and sensuality. And
Mm-hmm.
I have had people say, well, you've looked at, you know, erotic Islam, right? And I'm like, I didn't think it was an erotic religion. And so I'm just curious if you see any layers of eroticism within Islam that you've learned within, you know, your education process, and what you can speak to that on.
To be honest, I that is something that I am not very familiar with.
See, it's always just a separate component, is it? Sexuality and religion, you got to dig for it a little deeper.
Yeah, you have to know the right people to talk to, you know,
Yeah.
and like, you know, obviously, like the religions are, you know, sort of ongoing projects that reflect every aspect of society. So yeah, like you know, and unfortunately, like the type of Islam that we kind of have easy access to, the type of thinking, at least in the West in like this time period, is heavily informed by like, you know, it's a combination of like certain ethnic groups from certain class, you know, based on the immigration laws, you know, what type of people are allowed to come in, you know, you know, and I'm not saying this is bad or anything. I'm not saying that people are bad. It's just a certain, you know, it tends to be like doctors and engineers that come, you know, from the upper middle class of Pakistan and the Arab world and what have you, who are, you know, educated in a certain type of school. And the, you know, Saudi Arabia with its Salafi, way of type of Islam, which is sort of, you know, would compare it to sort of like the evangelicals. They're like the evangelicals of the Muslim world. Because they have all this oil money, they publish tons of junk, in my opinion, and pump it all over the world. And so like they have this like overreaching influence in that sense. And it's not like dangerous stuff I'm not talking about. They're not trying to like,
it's just that silly goofy stuff, the same with the
it's just that like, you know, it's like the 30-year-old guy who never got past Sunday school, that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, and again, this is astaghfirullah for my arrogance, but I'm just trying to, I don't know. I'm just trying to, I don't know.
All right. So what about Islam's views on sex and sexuality? We know that within a lot of Christian circles, there is condemnation of sex outside of marriage, and there's condemnation of same sex. With Islam, is it safe to presume there's those similar condemnations or maybe rejections of what is natural for?
Islam would has similar types of things like no adultery, no fornication, no homosexuality. Pretty standard among the Abrahamic faiths.
And if you do those things under Islam law, is it similar to Christian law in some circles where you burn in hell for it? Or like, I guess I'm curious about the eschatology of Islam. Is it annihilationism? Is it, you know, is there a universalism, something like that, or is there a hell, or how does, I guess?
Yeah, and I realized I'd never quite answered your previous question. I'm sorry. You were asking about the erotic elements or what have you. They are I guess it's answering both questions at the same time. So Islam has historically been quite a sex positive religion, I suppose. It was the monasticism or the celibacy of monks was seen as a corruption. You know, like there are traditions of the Prophet Muhammad saying like, I got married, and you know, if you don't like my lifestyle, then you're not like, the lifestyle of Muhammad, or the Sunnah as it's called, like his practices, his habitual way of doing things, that is kind of like seen as like the model for the ideal human. And when he says like my Sunnah, my established practice is that he got married. So if you don't marry, like, for some people it's kind of said it's like okay, like if somebody maybe doesn't have desire, or somebody maybe it's just not for them for some reason. It's not saying that you have to get married, but it is saying that like it's generally encouraged, especially if you fear that you would commit adultery otherwise. It's seen as like a way to it's sort of a way to protect yourself from the dangers of sexual attraction, etc., and
Yeah.
make it permissible, make it halal, make it so that you don't have to worry
And it's
about.
good to marry. I mean, I'm
Mhm,
married, so it's good to
mhm, mhm.
marry. But I
Yeah.
mean, okay, so that, I mean, yeah, that, and I think the Apostle Paul was the opposite of that and
Hmm.
was like, be like me, be celibate, you
Hmm.
know?
Well,
So
he said
that's
marry one woman if you're weak, but
oh, yeah, yeah. If
ideally,
you must, if you can't
yeah,
control
right,
yourself, I mean,
right,
we pitiful people you are, but
yes.
yeah. So it is good to be married. So that's a
Hmm.
good established kind of model to
Uh-huh.
imitate.
And
Okay.
then so marriage is generally is encouraged, and the and um, having intercourse with your spouse is seen as a good deed, like that, sort
And
of,
not
or
just for procreation, but for pleasure too.
oh yeah, yeah. There's
Yeah, yeah.
there's explicit reports about the prophet saying, like, for instance, you can use these, like, people asked him about, like, can we do the pull out method, or can we you use I don't know if they had, like, maybe they had herbal contraceptions or something like that. And he may have had an issue with that because it was like basically swallowing poison or something to, like, make it, I don't know. But anyway, but the I could be just imagining that, but I definitely, like, they asked him about, can we do coitus interruptus, the Latin, the pull-out method,
Yeah.
can we do
Yeah.
that? He said, yeah, can we do, yeah. So they would ask him about, like, can we do specific things,
Yeah.
because a lot of these people were often coming from, like, particular Jewish traditions where, like, they had very
Spilling the seed was sinful and yeah.
right, and the idea
Yeah.
of, like, certain, not all of Judaism was like this, but a certain, kind of like the rabbinic traditions had laws about, if you did sex a certain way, it would, like, make you go blind or
Yeah.
curse you or whatever. There were certain things that were seen as impure or whatever. And Islam is sort of a bit more, is significantly more permissive in that regard, and sees it as generally, like, as long as it's not anal, it's good.
Yeah. All right, sounds good. I think there's some denominations of Christianity that have similar
Uh-huh.
prescriptions for sex too. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's good. So then jumping forward then to, and maybe that was what stuck out as my idea about this unforgiving God,
Mm.
of
Okay.
us unforgiving Allah, that
Hmm.
maybe, yeah. So let's talk on that, because that's what stuck out to
Hmm.
you. And
Hmm.
so please share with us the forgiveness angle. I would
Sure.
hear it.
Yeah. So I guess what originally had sparked my reaching out to you was, you thinking that there was no forgiveness in Islam or something to that
Mm-hmm.
effect.
Yeah.
And well, the it's kind of like um, the one of the two of the primary attributes of God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is the Arabic word for God. It's similar to, like, the Hebrew Elohim. The im part is, like a case marking or something. But sometimes in the Bible it does appear as Elo as well, or just El,
Yeah.
or in the Aramaic parts, Allah, something to that effect. So yeah, so it's a cousin word, basically. And yeah, so Allah is God, and the some of the primary attributes that God usually describes himself with in the Quran are Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, which so Rahma is, it's this word that is often translated, and I think it's not always a great translation. They generally translate it as mercy.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually more like love in the sense of, the, like, sort of familial, unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
You have two types of words that are sometimes translated as love or mercy in the Quran. One is the word hub, and that one is more that is like love in the sense of, like, I'm happy with your actions or what have you. So, like, there's a verse, for instance, where it says, and fight those who fight you, but do not aggress, do not be the aggressors, for Allah or God does not love the aggressors. And so he's, like, in the sense of, it's something to do with what you're doing, is the question of hub, or like some quality in you. But rahma is sort of this unconditional love that has nothing to do with the person. It's due to no quality of the the person receiving it, but it's rather sort of the generosity, the grace, or the loving nature of God Himself is what is being referred to there, being referred to as similar to the love of a mother, for instance. The same root word is used to mean the word for womb. So like the womb of the mother is the rahm, and so rahma is like the wombness or something. So Ar-Rahman is the one, as one of the names of God, that means He's sort of like overflowing with this motherly love, I guess you could say. And Ar-Rahim is sort of another word from the same root that means something like the loving, or the compassionate, or the merciful. All these sort of things. Merciful in the sense of like you're being compassionate and understanding of people, and forgiving them. And in fact, the one of the like traditional prayers of the month of Ramadan that we say a lot during that month is Allahumma innaka afuun karimun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. So oh Allah, you are noble and generous and forgiving, and you love to forgive, so forgive me. Let me just read you some of the here. Well, so I'll leaving it at that, I will say that the difference, certain types of Christianity focus on the idea that Jesus's sacrifice was like a necessary to fulfill God's justice, right? And sometimes the Muslim response is kind of like, from our perspective, we would say, well, why can't God just forgive people? Like why does He have to kill somebody for it? And we would say, like, why would you take the sins of other people and put them on like this wonderful person, Jesus? So we kind of reject the idea that God, has to, like the wages of sin are death kind of thing.
So you kind of reject that whole scapegoat mentality. Like God didn't need this sacrifice in order to forgive. Yeah, I'm with you there.
And I think there, and granted, that's only one interpretation, really.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's Paul's interpretation, right? Yeah, Paul is big on that. But I don't think it's the only interpretation within the Christian tradition.
No.
For instance, like seeing the crucifixion as similar to the past, or similar in some interpretations to the Passover sacrifice, which is like a Thanksgiving sacrifice that well, I guess there you have multiple interpretations too, but some people see it as a Thanksgiving sacrifice, where it's like, well, God has forgiven us, so this is a celebration sacrifice. There's different interpretations there as well, but yeah, essentially in the Muslim understanding, the Islamic understanding of God, he is just, and but because He is, sort of, justice is sort of defined by Him. Like if He does it, it's almost by definition just. It's like he can forgive whoever He wants.
Yeah.
And His justice is that, well, okay, here's actually the primary meaning of the justice, I suppose, is that no one will be punished. No one will be punished undeservedly. Like in the afterlife. No one will be made to bear the sin of another. No one, is wronged. Like everyone is kind of given their due, I suppose. In that, or it's rather, there's almost like God is limiting Himself in how much He punishes, but He doesn't limit Himself in how much He forgives. And so we have a we just don't see the sacrifice element as necessary, and we just see it as like, if you make sense. God emphasizes that, if you forgive, if you are merciful to other people, I will be merciful to you. If you make sincere repentance for whatever, I'll forgive you. Like He sort of, that's His promise, really. That He makes to us, and we, I guess our style is we're not really supposed to talk. We're not really supposed to claim that we ourselves are like guaranteed paradise, or that we are, or that's a particular person. You're not supposed to talk about the afterlife of any particular person, because that's God's judgment. He can do what he
Yeah.
wants, you know, and we can talk about general things like doing such and such thing is bad and is the path to hell or something like that.
Yeah.
But like, whether, you know, if somebody does that thing, you can't be like, oh, that guy's going to hell, you know, because you never
That's
know.
good.
You don't know
Yeah.
why he did it. You don't know what's in his heart. You don't know if maybe yesterday he did something twice as good as that thing, that,
Yeah.
you know, twice as good as that, and it's enough that God says, you know, yes, you had a moment of weakness here, but you did this other thing, and because of that, I'm wiping that away, or what have you, you know.
Yeah, whereas like you can see tons of Christian denominations that like almost pat themselves on the back for being able to condemn their neighbor to hell and be like,
And
"Oh,
claim
you
that
go
they
do
are
it, and
guaranteed
I'm
heaven.
safe, and I am safe," and I just think,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Yeah.
well, if you're going, I'm going. No.
Right. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And I
that's
think,
good. And so
and
Jeff,
the forgiveness, and if we get forgiven, it'll be, you know, I feel like this is one of my friends said this. He was like, you know, if you're guaranteed forgiveness, then you get to the day of judgment, you're like, yeah, I know, I've been expecting this the whole time. But if you're like scared about it and you're like worried about it, not only you're probably gonna like check yourself a little bit more, but when you get to the day of judgment and God does forgive you, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, oh phew, yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a better release if you
Yeah.
want to use the erotic
Yeah.
metaphors.
Yes, definitely. So talk to me about how or if Islam ever tries to entangle itself in politics, or what kind of, if there's anything like that. I guess sometimes I see there's a lot of it, and it varies again in Christianity, but some sects of Christianity are like, God was political and we are going to be political and we're going to entangle our religion with politics, and others don't. So is there something similar like that within Islam, where you see, some
Yeah, I
groups
mean, there's obviously kind of a spectrum. There's like, there are some people who kind of see politics as sort of like, oh, this is a bunch of bullshit, like we shouldn't get involved in that. There is that, and then I guess on the other extreme is kind of like people who try to implement their interpretation of like something from the medieval tradition and try to transplant it into now without really like thinking about how that would work. It's, you know what I'm saying? So you have that kind of
propagandize it and make it their own.
Well, I mean, everybody makes it their own, but I was saying the like the extremist groups who are, what people generally call well, there are like more liberal Islamists, so that's kind of a big. Sorry, I'm getting a little caught up in my academia here, but but yeah, there's a spectrum basically, and most Muslims are, just like anybody else. There's people of different political persuasions, and yeah, I mean, I could talk about it I couldn't talk about it in detail about other countries, except just sort of very broad strokes, but I could talk about it in more detail, I suppose, in the US or something. But I think when I mentioned politics in religion, I think I was mentioning that because I think I see religion and politics as very intertwined. This is like why, this is one of my not very non-hippie moments, I suppose. And well, I had some notes actually here. I was trying to organize my thoughts. Well, I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, I think I got the sense from some of your episodes that you kind of see politics as sort of like something that religion just shouldn't be involved, or like, you go ahead and say what you think. I'm talking too much.
I see that religion and politics, I thought, were set to be distinctly separate from one another. And not separate that one is better or worse, but just they're separate realms. And when I see them entangle themselves in with one another, it feels like both are being forced on people. And I'm not for that, right? I want people to have choice in, what they want to listen to and what they want to learn from. And so that to me just seems like this kind of like dual force of power and control that I don't want together. Like, I believe that forms just even a greater monopoly of systemic hierarchies with, ruling authorities over us that I think they worry me, because with everything that could be created for good and it is created for good, it can also be used for evil. And just kind of looking at those two systems, I don't like to see the entanglement. And I know that within Christian circles, especially with progressive Christianity, they were supposed to be moving towards from disentangling themselves from the churches and, have this recognition of separation of church and state, but it's like impossible. So, I mean, overall for me, just in my own day-to-day, what I've done is I've kind of taken both the systems and put them over here as irrelevant to Danielle, but I know they're relevant to the rest of the world, so I still pay attention to them. And I still make my observations, and I still see, oh, that's problematic. And I can conjure up ideas that would solve that by, removing themselves from each other. But I mean, as a general overlook of all of this, I'm not going to convince people, right? I mean, I've tried. I'm like, politics isn't erotic. Let's reject politics. Let's focus on what's erotic, right? And people are like, well, let's make politics erotic. And I'm like, feminism tried to do that. It didn't work. So let's just,
what would be an example? How would you do that? How would you?
Well, feminism tried to eroticize politics. And that was in this, and I'm generalizing, but and it was in this grand hope of thinking that if women had the right to tangle themselves up in politics, that, we could fix all the problems and solve all the issues and bring sexy into it and bring women empowerment into it. And it just went towards more power and control instead of equality. Like, I feel like it took a leap overward and was like, okay, now that we're getting rights, now we want all of the power. And I'm like, okay, so the whole desire for power thing might be the problematic force behind it all. And so that's, in just my view, I think that's where the attempt to eroticize politics failed, because eroticization is not about power or control. And that's what ended up happening, I think, with just some of the ultra more radicalized feminist, ultra liberal movements. I mean, not all of
so when you're saying eroticize politics, you mean like make it sexy? And
make it loving, make it kind, make it compassionate, make it wholly inclusive, and fully actualize diversity in not just I just want diversity with this opinion or that one, and those are the only two, right? I don't want just two choices. I want all choices. And there's a lot of components that I see that politics and erotics just are completely oppositional to each other, mainly because I think overall in politics, more so in partisanship, it's about being opposed to something or against something. And eroticism is fully about being just for and unifying and integrating. And so that's where I see a foundational kind of butting of heads. And then it just stems on for there. It's like unity versus exclusivity, and exclusivity that looks like diversity but is sometimes manifested into more segregation, and so it gets tricky.
Okay.
From my view, I'm not saying it's the right view, but it's just the way I see
no,
it.
I'm just trying to see where you're coming from too. And I guess I see I'm trying to think of how galaxy brain to get here. That's my problem.
Galaxy brain sounds really cool.
Okay, all right, if you want to do that. Did I lose my audio there for a second? Or hello?
I'm here. I'm about to light a cigarette, and so
okay.
Muting it to allow you to talk.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I heard something. I thought maybe my headphones conked out. But anyway, So I heard this guy. He's a Greek Orthodox theologian, David Bentley Hart. He said something once that it really resonated with me.
I like him.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
he's super pretentious, but if you get over that, you're like, this dude's awesome. This guy loves it. He's having a great time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, he said that religions are not like closed systems. they're ongoing conversations which are often,
That,
primarily
yes.
informed by one particular text or another, or taking from a certain moment of revelation or what have you. And but a lot of times you also get this effect where you have somebody in history that has these great revelations and insight and charisma and whatever, and then and then that does sometimes build into a great project where people are like, hey, let's figure out what's the best thing to let's think about ethics, let's think about science, let's figure out what the best way to do a government is, and let's what should we do in how do we be good people. They generate these institutions and people like working together on these like very important fundamental, what's the meaning of life, all these things. Like, that's why I love religion, because like that's what it is. It's people working on these like fundamental, most important issues, right?
Yeah.
And then just naturally, one group in a certain place will be talking with each other more often than they're talking with other people, and they might kind of have certain texts that they kind of agree on are like the best or whatever, and they, over time, things sort of crystallize into what we call religion, right? um and so, like, the idea that religion and politics would be separate, like, I agree in the sense that, of course, like, I don't think it's a good idea to have the religion, to have the government, like, mandating theology and ritual practice and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, or like giving, uh, uh, different rights to different groups just based on like ethnicity or whatever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
or religious identification. But the so when I say that, like, religion and politics are, they're both part of the project of life. They're both part of,
Mm. That's
they're
a good
they're
point.
politics. We, like, I think we stereotype when we think of politics. We tend to think of, oh, that's like that, far away, like, gossipy bullshit that a bunch of people are doing in Washington or whatever, right?
Yep.
And, like, that is unfortunately part of it, because, like, there's, politicians are human beings, and we have a democracy where, I think democracy is good, but the downside is you have to deal with other people, so it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
the you know in my thinking about, like, Islamic history, about how, like, things evolved out of, like, the tribal law system, and you have similar things going on all over the world, where, like, what we think of as modern governments and legal systems are, built somewhat organically, you could say, out of these, like, tribal legal traditions, where, every tribe, maybe for a while, they have their own way of doing things, and um, in their internal matters, they do whatever they want. But then what happens when you have two tribes disagreeing on something? You have to, like, uh,
Mm.
how do you settle that, right? So you get
Yeah.
this building up of either legal norms that are kind of accepted in large regions, or you get, like, well, the tribe that's stronger, like, they get to pick they get to make the ruling or what have you, kind of naturally. The more, the stronger party will always, be able to choose the ruling, and maybe that, becomes part of the accepted sort of like international law, you could say,
Mm-hmm.
among all the different groups in that region. And this is, and I'm talking about, uh, you know, uh, in the 7th century and whatnot. But you know, that the same project continues into today, right? So I think there's an impulse that a lot of people have to sort of just juxtapose. They think of, like, large modern government bureaucracies, and then they have, like, small scale natural local governments. They kind of, like, have this image in their mind, like, oh, natural small local government, that's like natural, but this other stuff is like an alien import or something. I think, you
Mm.
know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
People have this idea, but like, yeah, I just think that, really, I mean, granted, like, large bureaucracies and large numbers of people, it's like, there are certain, like, pros and cons to that, in the sense that, like, it might be harder as an individual, for instance, to, like, influence the system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, perhaps even a few hundred years later, we, like, our cultures haven't, like, fully adapted to the modern system, so it's kind of like we're still struggling to, like, cope with all this new stuff that's happened in the past like 300-400 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So I like but I think when you really think about it, there's no reason like small government is necessarily better than large government or vice versa. For instance, and I mean by scale, as far as like what the bigger the scale, because if you're in a small village and there's no outside influence and it's just like the village elders decide what to do and they have a grudge against you, then you're screwed. Or if if it's a small town and whatever the one business guy is, his cousin is the mayor, he's going to get the village contracts and there's nothing they can do about it. Or if it's a small town and like all the jobs belong to this one factory that's there, or this coal mine or whatever, like then that company that runs that coal mine or that factory will essentially be in charge of the town, because the even if the village is supposedly democratic or trying to be democratic, they vote on everything. There's just too much pressure of like, well, do you want all the jobs to go away? Then you better not go against the company. So like I think that there's a sort of an understandable suspicion of large modern governments, but I think like we're kind of it's kind of the best we got, and we kind of like, especially when we're dealing with like global size problems and whatnot, we just sort of have to start increasingly cooperating on a global scale, in whatever way that means. And like these large scale, we have huge populations where it's just the most sensible thing to do is often not the most we tend to think of like, oh, the new way to do things, and then the old fashioned way is better. It's got to be more natural. But a lot of times really the reason people don't do an old fashioned thing anymore is because it's sort of just unsustainable at a large scale. Like we don't have if everybody had I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example of just the way, like, I don't know, in the 1700s or whatever, the way
we don't farm the way we used to, and damn it, we don't want to go back to that, because
right, exactly, yes, thank you.
However,
yeah, exactly.
So it's interesting that you talk about this, and I agree. We're always trying to like take a step forward and learn from what we've done in the past and make it more efficient and make it better for the world. What's interesting is I was recently listening to, I don't know if you know who Peter Kingsley is. He's a historian and a Jungian scholar. And he was talking about Carl Jung's, the Red Book, Liber Novus. It had come out a few years ago. Anyway, what Carl Jung had said really stood out to me. And it was about this idea that religion and history revealed to us the importance of these traditions, because when we want to kind of like when we want to move forward with a new creation, we have to give birth to the old in this new time. And so that we always have kind of like a gentle reverence and appreciation for our ancient structures of religion and tradition, and that we don't lose sight of that, which I think is, the general appeal and reverence in the three main religions of the world, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, is that how do we maintain those traditions in the new world? And how can we keep recreating those old traditions for this new time?
Yeah.
And because honestly, everything's such a circle sometimes, right? Everything just comes back around full circle. And so to see that, so what I wanted to say is like the farming practices. We don't want to farm the way they did, but we actually do, because we're learning that the way that we have mechanized everything is actually destroying the country or the world. And how can we look back at how we used to do things to kind of give birth to new environmental ideas? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
okay.
So anyway, roundabout way of reappreciating religion and tradition, I should say. And, just in listening to you talk and just, kind of processing a little bit, it is kind of silly for me to even say that I think they should be separate, because the reality is is if we are to be integrated beings, we want to make sure that we're folding in all the important dimensions of our mental, emotional, physical, sexual, spiritual selves. How can we not integrate our religion to our politics and our politics to our religion? Or how can they not have an entanglement and an influence upon one another?
Exactly.
Maybe in retrospect, maybe the moral good that initiated this kind of merging was so that one could keep the other in check, right? Because absolute power corrupts, right? And so to keep people in check from taking too much power and trying to be too controlling, to have this moral and ethical kind of influence on one another.
Yeah, I think religion, if we're talking about, sort of like the scriptures and the particular types of religion that we usually think of, I think they definitely act as a call to deep thinking and serious thinking about morality and like the fact that we should sort of, take ethics seriously and things like that. And I think politics is kind of like the tool or the way of implementing that. So for instance, I would see, the way to prevent, my seeing that like tyranny and tyranny is bad, right? Everyone can agree tyranny is bad. So how do we prevent that? And it's through decentralization of power and things like that, because if power gets, like you said, power corrupts, and so when power becomes too concentrated, it often, if it doesn't corrupt the person or the group, it often has corrupting effects on society. So like I said, if you're in a town where the power is concentrated in this factory or what have you, and the interests of that factory are X, Y, and Z, like they're gonna, they're pushing for the good of their profit. They're not pushing for what's gonna make the best, make the schools better or something, right? They're gonna try to, it's solely over, and it's not necessarily people are, doing it on purpose or like scheming like Illuminati stuff or whatever, but it's just like, if you make bankers in charge of everything, they're gonna give them a lot of influence. Or if you give any group a lot of more influence than they should in the society, they're gonna push society to like shape around what they think is important, etc. So just sort of like natural human things will cause that, or like, and here's I think where I would sort of, I think the main differentiation between me and like conservatives, political conservatives, or whatever, the right or what have you, whatever you want to call it, would be that concentration of power is a danger, and it's not just a threat in government institutions, and it's also a problem in financial things, because like when you have the fact that like there's people arguing all about how like, oh, it's good or bad that Trump got tossed off Twitter or what have you, right? And to me, I'm like, okay, the problem is not that we shouldn't be like rooting for our favorite millionaire, because that means we're going into like old feudalism where it's like we have lords that were like landlords that we live under, and we just we're in their armies and it's just lords fighting each other, right? So but the problem is that there's this company that's it's not, there's no vote, like we don't get to vote on what Twitter does. It's a private company that controls this thing that is so huge, such a huge part of our society, that it basically, people start to think of it as like, if you cut me off of that, that's my free speech, which technically it's not, because it's only the government that the First Amendment applies to, right? You don't, if you have you have perfect right to put whatever you want on your podcast, or not allow someone on your podcast, but if you decide not to have me on your podcast, I can't go and say, oh, she's restricting my free speech, right? So the thing is, we have to either like in this case, the problem is that this one guy basically can make this decision that impacts the entire country, and nobody voted for him. So the thing is, you either have to have strong antitrust laws that break these things up, so that if you get kicked off Twitter, then you're like, oh, whatever, I'll just go over to this other platform. But you don't have these massive companies that can make huge decisions for all of society. Or you nationalize it, you like you turn the internet into a utility, in which case the First Amendment would apply, and that's one. I tend to lean more toward the first solution, just because or you could have that option. I'm okay with like having, if you had a nationalized like a national Twitter, and then you had a bunch of other stuff as well, like maybe that would work. I don't know. I don't know what the perfect solution is, but that's kind of like the two thing that's the real issue, I think, as opposed to getting caught up in the sort of like the sort of, oh, Twitter's bad or good or whatever. It's the problem is that Twitter has that power.
It does, and that's the thing. You said you can't vote, but we can vote. We can vote with our choice to use that platform if we don't agree with their policies, which is, it's a tough pill to swallow, but it's true. If you don't like what Twitter did with Trump, if you don't like what Parler did with conservatives, it's America, and we have a choice in this country to. You can go build yourself your own damn platform, just like these people did, or you can go find another platform that will host your opinion without concern about how it's interpreted to other people. And yeah, it's a tricky situation because, I myself operate in circles that are already kind of like in this little limbo zone of censorship when it comes to anything it talks about sex or eroticism. It's a very tricky topic with different privately owned hosted forums, right? Which again, they have the right to do. And so I guess that's a great, that's just a good kind of thought process to think about is, would we want a municipal utility internet platform like that the federal government is overseeing? No kidding. And then all of, your constitutionally protected rights, would they be observed there? And is that the route to go? But then it's like, do you want to let the government run your internet? And then what if they take over the whole internet? And then do they get to control Twitter and Facebook? And how does that work? But just a think puzzle people could, consider for a little bit and ruminate on that. It's very interesting. But yeah, ultimately, I think it's like we're down to a choice. You do get to vote with your money. You get to vote with your usage of whatever apps that you prefer. And that, it's one, but it's one that sets, the stage for something to be imitated, if that's the case, to spark change. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess the other thing is like, usually, why do you think it is that Twitter has such a monopoly, for instance, on these things? It's
not so much I think Twitter has a monopoly, because I think Twitter doesn't even have like nearly the same amount of users that Facebook does. So, for instance, I don't even think Twitter's that influential. Facebook, however, is. They just have, all these rich guys, they have the capacity to buy up their competition. So in that regard, could they be viewed as a monopoly? What Amazon does with independent businesses that want to sell their stuff is like, I'm just going to buy your whole business and sell your shit for you, right?
Right.
And so they have that capacity to do it because they have the finances to do it. And if people don't like it, and I guess that's why we look at it like a monopoly, because we're like, ooh, I don't like that. But then at the same time, I'm like, but isn't it still legal? Right? There's nobody stopping them from doing it right now. Like Zuckerberg can go buy up all the apps he wants, so long as those people are willing to sell to him. Right. And what do you do from there?
Technically, there should be antitrust laws against a lot of these things.
So when does the government step in and stop them?
Well, yeah, that's
fingers with their donations.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's
where we see the intertangling. It's not so much religion we should worry about, but the economic system.
Well, religion could be a problem. It definitely is not. It's just not really an issue right now. Like it's not there's no well, I mean, I guess you could there's you know the evangelicals are using the process to implement things that they want, and if you don't agree with that, then you see that as a problem, I suppose. So yeah, so I see politics as it's our way of managing our affairs as a society. It's we're deciding who gets what, and so I just see it as a very kind of like, I see it as my, in trying to be a holistic person and trying to pay attention to the important issues. I think I think politics to me is one of those important issues that impacts people's lives. If I can vote for a candidate that will bring benefit to people, that will okay, hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Bring
if
benefit
I can
to people.
Right. If I can bring benefit to people, to the society, then it's kind of like I should do that. That's a good thing. And so yeah, I just see, we're such we praise the God, we have like so many resources in the world, and in our country specifically, as well. Like there's no reason we should have homeless people in slums and stuff like that.
I agree.
We and nobody takes it, like there's such a, like and I mean, if I can get a little fire and brimstone, so it's just like it just strikes me, in Matthew 23, let me just reference this I don't know if you're Matthew 23.
I think I just used this one a few weeks ago, but yeah.
Where he said, where Jesus is preaching, he says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees and hypocrites! You build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous, and you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we wouldn't have taken part with them in shedding the prophets' blood. And so you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your ancestors' sin. And that just sprung to mind. I think that's especially relevant to like what's going on in our politics right now, where you just like
all the prophets are eating some big old plates of crow right now, I think.
In the big crow.
All the self-anointed prophets of the evangelical and charismatic churches are eating a bunch of crow right now because their savior Trump didn't.
Sorry, I'm not. I don't know that phrase. Eating crow, like, is that feeling?
Just kind of like having to be forced with doing an about face,
Oh, okay.
Because they were so wrong with.
Oh, okay.
Must be a Minnesotan
Gotcha.
thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I maybe have heard it.
We eat plates of crow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not what I know, but yeah, and just like the like. I really, just like the fact that we had, like, I've always, and I think there's a spiritual element to this as well. Part of what I think, so I'll try to be more specific, so I'm not trying to tiptoe around and be whatever politically correct or something. So
just say what you want to say.
Okay, all right, I'll say what I want to say. All right, that's what your show style is, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a very kind of like Republican suburban kind of bubble, if you will. And just and you get the sense that, like, at least I did, I kind of got the sense that, like, the way, like, nobody really ever taught me well how to interpret politics, or like, I remember my first election, I think, was John McCain and Obama, and I was just like, I don't know what to think of these guys. Their parties sound whatever. It was, and granted, things were less polarized at that time, maybe in some ways. I don't know. That's maybe a myth. That could be a little bit of a myth, actually.
And that was so long ago. I don't think I was paying attention either.
Yeah, and so it's just like, so I totally empathize with a lot of people who kind of know that there's a lot of horse shit going on and a lot of bullshit in the sort of like narratives that you're given, right?
Yeah.
And that, like, you need to dig to find out what's actually going on. But then I'm like, you also have to be careful that you're not building your own bullshit. Like, you got to be like, this takes study. This is not just like watching a bunch of YouTube videos. No, YouTube videos can be good, but when I say that, I mean like weird conspiracy theory YouTube stuff.
Like
Sometimes I
QAnon?
watch, yeah, or whatever. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff, and granted, I enjoy some of this stuff too, and
It's
it
fun to
can be,
watch.
yeah, and
All
it could be,
plausible.
it could
All
be food for
plausible.
thought.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, some
Plausible.
they often have they have kernels of truth. Yes, yes, I think
Yes.
they have kernels of truth, but they often then they spiral into, you know, not, la la land where you
Then
can't
you're
really
like, all
like disprove
right,
anything.
are you
And
tripping? What's going on?
yeah, I mean, it actually is. It is a type of religious like phenomenon, where people are like, they want to make sense of the world, right?
Right.
And it's easier to be like, oh, well, that's, you know, this spirit manifesting is this group, and this happened because of the will of this person, and John F. Kennedy will come back from the dead to do this, or whatever. So it's like, I understand the kind of psychological appeal of it, but like, yeah, I just see it as kind of, again, part of the project, the holistic project of trying to learn about the world, which is learning about God. Like, God, this is God's creation, this is His will,
Yeah.
this is, you know, uh, uh, Islam is very monotheistic and very like, no, there's nothing aside from the will of God. Like, nothing stops what God's will, or at least I should, maybe not all of Islam. Like, some people say, will a little bit emphasize the question of free will a little bit more. I'm a little bit more like, well, we have to act as if we have free will anyway. Like, it doesn't really make a difference if we have free will or not. So,
Yeah.
but I think technically, in a certain sense, like, on a higher level, like, everything is just everything that we're experiencing, everything we're doing is a unfolding of God, an unfolding of His nature.
I like that.
Oh God, all right, I can't remember where I
We were
went with that.
talking about how we need to explore the world and think about these
Right.
ideas.
Yes. I kind of came out of that bubble, and like, I took an Arabic class, and I learned about Islam, and I, met different people, and we all go through these phases. For a while, I was kind of like libertarian. I was like a Ron Paul supporter, because he's like not about bombing random countries for no reason,
And
and
ending the
he seems like,
Fed. That's a good
and
idea.
he seems like a nice guy, and like,
Yeah.
like, he was just, yeah, he was the most like likable and relatable and seemingly sensible person, that I recall at the time. And the and then I just continued to learn things and watch different shows, and now like, I've started to, the past few years, I've been learning a lot from just like from the left, and and when I say the left, I mean, I mean, not quite the, like, it's the people who I guess would consider themselves farther left than like the standard Democrats, and I think, how would I describe it? I mean, granted, like I said, there's people with all sorts of different types of ideas, but generally, I would say one of the defining things, and this is almost spiritual for me, is that, like, every I can always remember, like, growing up, and now, even though, I go past a homeless person on the street or something, and sometimes I give them something, but I know, like, it's whatever, they're going to be homeless tomorrow. Like, I can't, I feel trapped that I'm like, I can't, I'm
And
not a
why don't
social.
we invite them to our house, right? Because we caught up in that,
Well,
right?
that's complicated, because,
Exactly. I know.
right. So it's complicated. So, and so I had that frustration, and then there's kind of this idea that, like, there's this very strong impulse from my religious background and from my religion, from my, my faith, both, both from my Christian life, and now, what, as I'm continuing to live it in the Islamic tradition, that, like, this is, like, why would we allow this to happen here? This is like our obligation to take care of these people. We have, there's no shortage of food, there's no shortage of space. Have you seen the giant, like, bank lobbies that are empty at night while homeless people sleep outside? Like, there's no shortage of space, or anything. Like, it's just the fact that we insist on, basically, the way we distribute things, the way we set up everything to be through a certain system, that, a certain system of How do jobs work? Who gets paid for what? Where does the money come from? Et cetera, et cetera. And like and so I feel like after we walk out of the church or the mosque or whatever, we're kind of given all these excuses of like, there's nothing you can do. And then I was kind of like, wait a minute, didn't we like go to the freaking moon? Didn't we like build the highway system? Like, and granted, it's not like just, I'm going to go build a highway system as a cowboy. It's like we friggin' like said, okay, the government is going to, and it's democracy. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better than the alternative, which is people, like big powerful institutions that are not accountable in any way, like large corporations. We freaking decided as a society that we're gonna make it easier for people to like travel around, and it changed life forever. It's huge. It's a huge system. Like, you're telling me we can do that, and we can't friggin' just like, all right, we're going to take chop a piece of the budget here. We're going to build these houses. We're going to invest in these schools. We're going to give all these people social care and counseling for drugs and whatever. And we could fix all this shit in a year if we wanted to. Maybe that's a little bit crazy, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that was what I found in the left, is this type of idea that, hey, we can actually do this shit. Like, people have been making excuses for it forever, but we could, like, this is not impossible, and there's people making like, okay, some, weird transgender person on Twitter, like, makes fun of you or calls you a cis scum or whatever. And okay, that's annoying. That's weird, whatever. But like, then you're going to use that as an excuse to like not give people health care. Like, what is going on? Like, I just have this, I'm very, I just feel that, the thrust of, what you could like, like the type of ideas that are coming out of like, Bernie Sanders and that wing of the that wing of the party, and mostly, there's like the left as far as. I just feel very strongly that like those economic and cultural to some extent projects are sort of where we should be, if we're to be serious about our ethics and living them and implementing them. Like, that's what we should do. Is like the New Deal back in like FDR's days. FDR was like one of the most popular presidents of all time, and he set up for the first time things like Social Security and like, I understand
the Great New Deal, Social Security.
Exactly. So that's why I'm like, let's do the Green New Deal. Let's do all this shit. Like, why not? Like, it's just, anyway. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I see it as, that's how I, like, if I am to live as someone trying to live out the will of God and implement justice, etc., I'm going to use whatever tools are at my disposal, which is, this democratic society, which I think is, the best we can do, more or less, or, we can. I think we're still working on it, obviously.
I think we are. I think we see it folding and shifting, and so long as we allow what it is that we have as our like rule of law, if we allow it to grow and transform, I think we'll see that path towards progress, and we will hopefully take this human stance that getting people in houses and making sure they're fed and making sure they're provided for takes precedence over deciding which country we should invade next because we want their resources, because we have enough resources. We don't need to be taking anybody's resources right now. We need to be over here distributing the resources to everybody, to those who don't have it, and then worry. Why are we worrying about a lack of resources when we know we have such an abundant culture here in this country? I mean, I'm totally on board with you like that. Probably just have, different ways about getting that, and that we'll probably disagree with. So.
Yeah, and I just and I understand that, but I also kind of just say like, well, like I said, we built the highway system. Like, if we can do that, we can do some pretty,
if we can do that, we can do. I mean, if we were like, we want to get from point A to point B, why can't we say now we want to get people at a point A to start? I mean, and give them that. And that's a good hope for humanity to bring about healing and unity Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
I want to be mindful of your time. So I think maybe we should probably wrap this, but I am so appreciative of you reaching out to me, for sharing space with me. And I learned much about Islam and much about you, Matthew. And I'm just really, really appreciative of that. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thanks for talking with me.
Yeah. And let's, try and do it again. If you find any more critiques in any of the other podcasts, be sure to let me know. And we can always meet again.
I'm always down to talk philosophy, theology, politics.
I might want to pick your brain about what is truth in a couple of weeks here. I actually want to get a little panel together and talk about truth.
Oh boy.
From an ontological view.
Oh God.
I've been reading Michel Foucault, so I'm kind of different.
Okay. Yeah, I have read a little bit of him. He's a little much, but
He is. I tried a long time ago, and I was like, fuck this. And then I think I did Nietzsche, which was heavy.
I prefer to take those guys. Like, I like to have it secondhand. I just like somebody read them, study them, and tell me what they're saying. Because
I've had this book for like 6 years. Atlas Shrugged. Have you ever read it? Ayn Rand?
No, I'm generally familiar with the ideas of it or whatever.
Yeah, of objectivism.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I opened that today, and I went to the back. I went to the ending first, and I got sucked into that, and just these ideas of how to bring about a greater world, and it was kind of amazing. So I'm going in some deep journeys lately, so I might have you back to have some deeper philosophical chats.
I'm working on like kind of what I'm working on right now, just in my my mental spare time, is I'm just thinking about consciousness, because that's really one of the big ones. That's one of the, and I think truth is very much connected to that.
Yes.
I can't but yeah, like I said, the creation of Allah is, there's a verse in the Quran that to God belongs the east and the west. Wherever you turn your face, there is the face of God. So like that's
beautiful.
That's like my spirituality, is like learning things and
seeing
trying
God
to
in it.
Yeah, basically. So anything, I'm always happy to talk about it. And
awesome.
Yeah, whatever.
All right. Well, thank you.
Sure thing.
And listeners, thanks for listening. Take care.
Good night.